on the morning commute. Unfortunately, I think the weather probably impacted a little bit of the atmosphere last night inside of Gamebridge Fieldhouse. To talk more about the Pacers and the Cavs last night, he is the head coach of the Indiana Pacers, and he's with us right now, Rick Carlisle. Coach, good morning to you. How are you?
Good. Sound like you guys were slow jamming the news there with that music.
Little slow jam action. Can you get behind that?
Sure, why not?
Look at that. All right. Mark Dykton, jot that down. We might need that for a Rick Carlisle reentry here coming up later in the season. Coach, defensively, you guys have been very good over the last week and a half, 2 weeks or so. But last night, a lot of second chance points early in the game. Did you see that as the biggest difference for Cleveland?
Yeah, we didn't do a good enough job hitting first on blockouts, and I think they hit us for 9 or 11 second chance points in the first quarter, and that was a bad start.
Rick, when you look at these games and you're able to kind of climb back into it, I guess what's the message when you see the version of yourselves that obviously can play the brand of basketball you want to? Like, is that something that you revisit after the game? Like, hey, this is how we have to play the entire 4 quarters, or, you know, how in your face with it are you?
Well, are you talking about how we're presently constructed?
Yeah, because it is, you know, I don't want to say it's an excuse, but at the same time, there are some legitimate reasons for maybe why you aren't playing your typical brand of basketball.
Yeah, we've had to adjust a lot, and I think that's obvious. And so, look, we've made progress in the last 7 games. So before last night, in the previous 6 games, we were number 1 in the league in defense. So that's progress, and that's something to be proud of. But as we know, it's not a destination. I mean, this all requires continued work, continued focus, and so we had slippage last night, pretty obviously. Cleveland came in here on a 3-game losing streak. Give them credit; they were very determined, and Mitchell got going, and we didn't have very many answers.
I know you mentioned your defense really playing at a high level. Of course, some slippage last night, as you mentioned. But on top of that, looking at Jay Huff and what he's really done for your team over the last week or so, how have you seen him find a groove offensively and defensively? Last time I checked, I believe he was leading the league in blocks per game.
Yeah, he's made great progress, and he's a terrific kid. He came into a situation that was quite different than Memphis. There's been certainly an adjustment period for him. A lot of things with our team has changed this year, but as we've gone along and had, some moderate success over the last 7 games, he's certainly been a big part of it with his ability to stretch the floor. He's rebounded well, and you mentioned the block shots. I mean, he's pretty elite in that area.
Pacers Nuggets coming up tomorrow night inside of Gamebridge Fieldhouse. Rick Carlisle with us here on the Payless Liquors hotline. You mentioned that number 1 defense, there for about a 2-week stretch. What have you liked from a change standpoint on that end of the floor? Again, we've seen some lineup tweaks, but what has it been on the defensive end that's given you certainly much more optimism about where you guys are playing?
Probably just simply the fact that we've been physical. We've done a reasonably good job of keeping people off the free throw line when we've had success. Our rebounding has been better, certainly with the exception of last night. And so, it's NBA is a difficult league. It's a difficult league. It's become more physical. We were certainly a part of that with how we played the last couple of years. And so you always have to keep adjusting, and then you have to adjust your adjustments.
I wanted to go back to over the weekend, Coach. Obviously, you guys win the back-to-back against Washington and Chicago, and you see Pascal Siakam hit that game winner. You guys have been on the wrong side of several of those shots here throughout the early part of the season. If you could, from your perspective, what did you see from Siakam on that play. I was particularly struck by just his entire demeanor, cool, calm, collected, seemingly knowing where the clock is, the pump fake, all of it. Could you kind of walk us through what you saw from Pascal in that moment to win the game?
Yeah, he all the things you just mentioned, certainly. He had a good feel for the clock. We tried to space the floor to give him an angle in an area to go to get to a spot. It was not an easy shot. And I was right behind him in line with the basket. And in real time, just standing there, it looked like he went to his spot and rose up. But there was actually a hesitation. And it reminded me a little bit of Dirk Nowitzki. I saw many game winners during my 13 years with him. I think 11 out of 13 were with him. And Pascal has the ability to, at the last second, very calmly and very coolly change the angle of the shot, to back up a little bit, and ball goes a little bit higher. You can go up and try to block it all you want, but when he makes that geometrical change and gets it up, there's just no way to get to it. And it was perfection. As difficult as it was, I mean, the only thing better would have been if the red light had gone on while the ball was in the air. But 0.1 on the clock is pretty damn good, and it was an amazing shot and certainly much needed.
Yeah, I was saying, watching that game, we got to get the home clock operator to give him the walk-off win there with the 0.1 still left on the clock. But, Rick, you touched on a little bit there, but how much value do you think it is, especially in a league like this where there's so many guys that can, do multiple things now as far as, shoot, drive, pass, whatever, but you still have that one guy, at least on your roster, and I think Benedict has some of this as well, that when you're kind of in a bind, he can still get a pretty good look. You've been around the game for a long time. How rare of a talent is that?
Well, this is the definition of a max player. A guy that can consistently create an advantage for his team. So, really the technical definition is probably can consistently create an advantage for himself. But in Pascal's mind, it's all about the team and what he can do for the team. And so, it's made him, a very special player for us. He's a very special person, and how he's led through this difficult stretch has been quite exceptional, because he's remained very upbeat. He's had great wisdom. He picks the exact right spots to interject on what's going on and to help. And, his consistency has been impeccable.
Again, Rick Carlisle with us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline as the Pacers will get back to work. Coming up tomorrow night, it'll be the Pacers and Nuggets inside of Gamebridge Fieldhouse. Coach, we've talked a little bit these last 2 days on the show about how this weekend, Saturday specifically, is kind of a dream scenario for IU fans. Their basketball team will play inside of your building coming up Saturday afternoon against Louisville. Then they'll play in the Big Ten title 1-2 Saturday night. It kind of got me thinking. I don't know if we've ever asked you this. Did you have a favorite team? Any sport when you were growing up, or a favorite player? I get you weren't dialing up League Pass necessarily, but did you have a favorite team, a favorite player growing up?
You talking about football or basketball, or either?
I guess any. Just like childhood Rick Carlisle. Did he have a favorite sport or favorite team?
Yeah, I followed the NBA, largely through magazines growing up, because we didn't have cable TV. I think I've probably told you this story, but early on, when I was 10 or 11 years old, that was when Lou Alcindor was drafted by the Bucks, and he and Oscar were playing together there, and I became a big fan of Alcindor, who became Kareem, and then I kind of hooked on with the Lakers in '72, when they had their run, and at one point won 33 games in a row. And I remember listening to games on AM radio, during the playoffs that year. I mean, back in those days where we lived up near Canada, you could pick up AM radio signals, late at night, and it was pretty amazing. It would come through very clear, and that was the year they had, West, Goodrich, McMillan, Happy Hairston, and Chamberlain as their starters, and they were great. And and then after that, I'm just trying to think. I was somewhat of a Knicks fan, in the early '70s as well. My dad grew up in Elmsford, New York, which is in Westchester County. We went to a couple of Knicks games early on at the Garden. Those were very, very memorable. I was in my, 11, 12, 13-year-old, range of age. And then, all that kind of came full circle when I got signed by the Knicks on December 1st of '87. And that night had my best game as a pro, Madison Square Garden. And I just, so much of that stuff was so cool. And then, when the ABA NBA merger happened, Dr. J was the guy that was, I was completely enamored with, the style of play, the grace, the dunks, all that stuff. And, of course, emulating a guy who you could never in a zillion years hope to play like was kind of idiotic in a lot of ways, but it was inspirational, watching him. And so, and then, the irony of ironies was, I was pretty much a Celtic hater in those days, because of my love of Dr. J and the Sixers. And then I get drafted by Boston, and then, once I got there and made the team, of course, all that changed. And, very interestingly, the opportunity to play with Larry for 3 years in Boston, Larry Bird, that is, and, became friends with him. And it was one of the reasons that, we ended up coaching together and then working together, a little further on down the line. But, that's kind of the history of my favorite teams, et cetera. As far as football goes, right now it's the Colts, baby. I'm dialed in, and those damn officials the other day. What a screwing that was.
I don't think they can find you across leagues,
I was
right?
say, I'd love to follow up, but I'm worried about your pocket. I don't know if they can. Roger Goodell can step in there, Coach.
He ain't gonna get me. He ain't gonna get me.
I love that.
Adam can get me, but Goodell can't. He can't touch me. So,
I love it. So last one I have for you, Rick, and actually this was from a debate I had with my family during Thanksgiving. We always do okay, whose era is better? Your era with LeBron and SGA now, and Jokic versus my dad's he loves the Michael Jordan and Larry Bird and all those guys, and Dr. J, like you said. So we were looking at the Michael Jordan game. We scored 63. I believe you were on Boston when this happened. And looking at the spacing from that game, Rick, is jarring to me because it's so different. Not taking anything away from the skill level that each era has, but as a coach and as a player throughout the years, what has it been like to evolve with the spacing of the game? I know you talked about the physicality a little bit earlier in this interview, but the spacing's so different, and how has that maybe affected how you coach and the rotations you have and things of that nature?
Yeah, it was maybe a week and a half ago. I was going through the channels and NBA TV was on, and they had Game 5 of the playoff series between Philadelphia and New Jersey, and it was a series that went to a deciding fifth game in the first round. Every game in the first 4 games was won by the road team. So, New Jersey won the first 2 games in Philly. Philly won the next 2 games in New Jersey. And this is New Jersey with, Michael Ray Richardson, Buck Williams, Albert King, Otis Birdsong, Darwin Cook, a lot of good players. And Philly was, it was Dr. J, and really it was their pretty much championship team intact. I think a year or two after the championship, and so watching that game, I had the same. I had this exact same thought. I mean, everything was so bunched in. I don't think I saw one 3-point shot taken. In fact, Philadelphia was down late, and they had a couple of possessions left. They didn't even think about shooting a three, So it was so much has changed. And look, there was a scoring crisis in the 90s and headed into the early 2000s, and then Jerry Colangelo had a group that was put together by David Stern. David gave them autonomy to make some rule changes to make the game better, to help evolve the game forward. So the big change was you could play any defense as long as you did not get a defensive 3-second violation. And so all of a sudden, instead of grid lines that determined whether or not you were legal or not, you could now double team a guy that didn't have the ball, and that didn't used to be the case. So the ball had to move, and as the ball had to move more with the legality of zone defense, etc. Players had to develop a different skill set. The game started to breathe more. The 3-point shot started to be realized as the potent weapon that it's viewed as today. That was kind of the beginning of the change of the game. And then, nowadays you have analytics. You've got a 3-point line, but a lot of these guys are shooting from what would be a 4-point line. And, I love the way the game has changed. It's really the ultimate challenge to play. It's the ultimate challenge to defend in it. And, it's just super compelling because as we've seen over the last 2 years, especially, no lead is too large and no deficit is too big, and the 3-point shot and the speed of the game has put a great deal of excitement into it. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. And watch that game 5. Man, I've never seen so many people bunched up together in the lane. It was unbelievable. The only game that I would compare it to that I've seen that I went back years later and happened to see on TV when we were playing Washington back in it was around 2008 or something. It was when I first got to Dallas. They had our Virginia-Georgetown game. So that was Ewing versus Sampson. And that game had no 3-point line, no shot clock. and we were sitting in a zone, and it was packed in, and possessions were super long, and it was like watching paint dry. I mean, it was really arduous. And so I'm thrilled with the way the game's evolved over the years. It had to, in some way, shape, or form. There was always talk about, hey, the floor needs to be bigger. Maybe the rim needs to get higher, all that kind of stuff. None of that stuff was going to happen because NBA arenas are configured to be a certain size. There are certain, the high revenue seats were not going to go away. And so the game had to adjust, and it has. And as we move forward, you're going to see more 5 men that can stretch the floor, put the ball on the floor, and do all the skill things as well. And it'll get harder and harder to guard.
I always think of scoring. You guys put up, 80-something on Cleveland in the first half of a playoff game last year. And, 20 years ago, Pacers-Pistons, it was the first one to 75 would win that series in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, but I'll tell you one, my first year in Detroit, we developed a team that was a tough-minded defensive team. That was our identity. We gave up 86 points a game for the season.
Jeez.
And that was kind of the beginning of this era. That my first year of coaching, was that year, and it was also the first year of the Colangelo rule changes. And so, we were all adjusting, but we had defenders. I mean, we had Ben Wallace, who really nobody really knew who Ben Wallace was at that point in time, but he became Defensive Player of the Year his second year with us, and went on to win it like 3 additional times. And under these new rules, you could still have a great defensive team. And so everyone wants to have an identity. And so right now, with us, our identity is we have found a formula to defend well, but it's greatly dependent on the right kind of offense and the right kind of execution at both ends.
Pacers have won 2 of 3 again. They got Denver coming up tomorrow night. Reminder, and I think it's a good reminder on a day like today. You got the Lloyd Pierce annual coat drive coming up 3:30 to 5:30 today over at the Goodwill Horizon House right off of Washington Street. So if you can make it out to that, certainly do. Coach, as always, thank you, sir. We'll chat next week.
Cheers. Take care.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you want to get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.